She thought it was just another assignment. Cover an air show. Interview some pilots. Write the story. But when the F-22 pilots heard her call sign Echo 7, everything changed. They recognized the legendary fighter pilot who had disappeared 6 years ago. Now, she had to confront the past she had been running from. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Sarah Martinez pulled her old press badge from her desk drawer. It was dusty from 6 months of not being used. She looked at the photo on the badge. A younger version of herself stared back. That version had been confident. That version had known exactly where she was going. Now, at 38 years old, Sarah wasn't so sure anymore. "Are you really doing this?" her sister Linda asked from the doorway of Sarah's apartment. Linda held a cup of coffee and looked concerned. "It's just an assignment," Sarah replied, tucking the badge into her bag. "One air show. One article. That's all." "You haven't done journalism in half a year," Linda said. "You've been writing blogs about cooking and home renovation. And now you want to jump back into aviation reporting?" Sarah smiled weakly. "Aviation reporting was my passion once. Maybe it still is." The truth was more complicated. Sarah had left aviation reporting because it reminded her of her past. Every time she covered an air show, she saw F-22 Raptors and thought about the life she had given up. The career she had walked away from. The person she used to be. But her editor at National Aviation News had called her that morning. He needed someone to cover the F-22 demonstration at Nellis Air Force Base this weekend. He remembered her excellent work from years ago. He wanted her back. "Come on," Linda said. "You can do this. You were the best aviation reporter they had." Sarah took a deep breath. "I was a lot of things once." Saturday morning, Sarah drove through the Nevada desert toward Nellis Air Force Base. The landscape was flat and empty. Mile after mile of nothing but sand and sky. She had always loved this drive. It cleared her mind. It made her feel free. As she got closer to the base, memories started coming back. Memories she had tried to forget. Memories of her time as a fighter pilot. Of climbing into the cockpit of an F-22 Raptor. Of feeling the raw power of the aircraft under her control, the smell of jet fuel, the sound of the engines roaring to life, the feeling of G-forces pushing her into her seat during a hard turn at 40,000 feet. Her call sign had been Echo 7. It meant she was the 7th pilot in her squadron to get a call sign starting with E. It was a good name. Her commanding officer had given it to her after a particularly difficult training exercise where she had come back when no one thought she would make it. She had been flying low level through a canyon with a mechanical failure. Her hydraulic system had been damaged. Many pilots would have ejected. But Sarah had nursed the crippled aircraft back to base and landed it safely. "You were like an echo," he had told her. "Everyone thought you were gone. But you came back. You came back stronger." Sarah had loved that call sign. She had loved being a pilot. She had loved the camaraderie of her squadron. She had loved the responsibility of flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft. She had loved the pure adrenaline rush of flying at supersonic speeds. But 6 years ago, she had walked away from it all. It had happened after a mission over Syria. A mission that had changed everything. She had lost her wingman, Captain David Chen, in that mission. They had been flying together since training. They had been best friends. And in one moment, his aircraft had been hit. In one moment, he was gone. Sarah had seen it happen. She had watched his F-22 spiral down out of the sky. She had reasons for leaving that made sense at the time. Reasons that still made sense. But that didn't make it hurt any less. The guilt of surviving when he didn't had been overwhelming. Flying had become impossible. Every time she climbed into the cockpit, she would see David's face. She would hear the radio call that he wasn't coming home. So she had made the decision to leave. She had resigned from the Air Force. She had walked away from everything she had worked for. Her family had supported her decision. They said it was brave to recognize when something was hurting you. They said she needed time to heal. But in her heart, Sarah had always wondered if she was a coward. If she had given up too easily. If she had let David down by walking away from the thing they had both loved. As she pulled through the gates of Nellis Air Force Base, Sarah felt her heart start to race. The base hadn't changed much in 6 years. The same buildings, the same runways, the same desert landscape surrounding everything. But Sarah felt different. She was different now. She presented her credentials at security. The guard looked at her badge carefully. His eyes widened slightly as he read the name. "Welcome back, ma'am," he said with a smile and a note of recognition. "Haven't seen you in a while. Good to have you back on base." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "Thanks," she said quietly. "It's good to be back. In a way." She drove toward the media parking area slowly, taking in the familiar sights. The flight line in the distance. The runway where she had taken off and landed thousands of times. The control tower where she had heard countless radio calls. The hangars where she had prepared for missions. She grabbed her camera bag from the passenger seat. Her hands were shaking slightly as she slung it over her shoulder. She took several deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. Just one article, she told herself. You can do this. You can stay professional. You can stay focused. She stepped out of the car and looked up at the sky. It was clear and blue. Perfect flying weather. Somewhere out there, pilots like Jennifer were probably flying practice missions. They were doing what Sarah used to do. They were living the life that Sarah had chosen to leave behind. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment and whispered something to the memory of David Chin. A prayer. A promise. An apology for leaving. An apology for surviving. Then she opened her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the media briefing area. She could feel the tension in her jaw. She could feel her heart beating in her chest. But she was here. She was doing this. And she was going to be strong enough to handle whatever happened today. The media area was already crowded. Sarah recognized some faces from her old days of reporting. Tom Richardson from Aviation Weekly waved at her. She waved back but didn't approach him. She wasn't ready to talk yet. She wasn't ready to explain why she had disappeared from aviation reporting. A public affairs officer named Captain James Rodriguez approached the group of reporters. "Welcome, everyone," he announced. "We have a special program for you today. 3 of our best F-22 pilots will perform a demonstration flight. After the flight, you'll have the opportunity to conduct interviews with each pilot. We'll do them one-on-one in that building over there." He pointed to a small structure near the runway. "This is an incredible opportunity," Captain Rodriguez continued. "These pilots represent the future of air combat. They're trained on the latest tactics and technology. You'll get some excellent material for your stories." Sarah listened carefully and took notes. But her mind was drifting. She kept thinking about her old squadron. About flying formation with other pilots. About the feeling of banking hard at 5GS and knowing that your body could handle it because you were trained. Because you were strong, because you were born to do this. One of the other reporters, a young woman named Jennifer, asked Sarah a question. "You used to cover aviation, right? I read some of your old articles. They were really good. Why did you stop?" Sarah wasn't expecting the question. She thought for a moment before answering. "Life changes," she said simply. "I needed to do something different for a while." Jennifer nodded like she understood, but she didn't. Nobody understood unless they had lived it themselves. The 3 F-22 Raptors taxied out to the runway at exactly 10 o'clock. From a distance, they looked identical. Dark gray. Sleek. Powerful. But as Sarah watched them through her camera lens, she could see the differences in how the pilots handled the aircraft. The first pilot flew with smooth, efficient movements. This was a veteran. Someone who had flown hundreds of times and could do it in their sleep. The second pilot was more aggressive. Pushing the aircraft harder, testing the limits. A younger pilot, someone still proving themselves. The third pilot. Sarah couldn't take her eyes off the third pilot. The aircraft moved through the sky like it was an extension of the pilot's body. Every maneuver was perfect. Every turn was precise. This pilot wasn't showing off. This pilot was flying with an artistry that Sarah recognized immediately. This was someone who loved flying the way she had loved it. The demonstration lasted 20 minutes. The pilots performed barrel rolls. They did vertical climbs. They executed split-S maneuvers that made the crowd gasp. They flew in perfect formation, so close together that it seemed impossible they weren't touching. When it was over, the three aircraft turned back toward the base and executed a flawless landing. Sarah was breathing hard. Watching those aircraft had affected her more than she expected. It had brought back all the feelings she thought she had buried. The desire to be up there, the knowledge that she belonged in that cockpit, the pain of knowing that she had walked away. An hour later, Sarah sat in the interview building waiting for the first pilot. Her palms were sweating. She wiped them on her jeans nervously. This was the real test. Could she maintain her professionalism when sitting face to face with people who were still living the life she had abandoned? Captain Marcus Davies arrived exactly on time. He was a tall man in his 50s, with gray at the temples and lines around his eyes that spoke of years spent squinting into the sun. He had been flying F-22s for 20 years. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had done something extremely difficult so many times that it had become second nature. "Captain Davies," Sarah said, shaking his hand. "Thank you for taking time to talk with me." "Always happy to talk about the aircraft," he replied, settling into the chair across from her. "Not many people understand what these machines can do." Sarah conducted a professional interview. She asked him about aircraft maintenance, training procedures, and the challenges of flying supersonic jets. She took notes. She asked follow-up questions. She did her job well. But all the while, her mind wasn't on the interview. She kept thinking about the third pilot. The one who had flown so beautifully. The one who had handled that F-22 like an artist handles a brush. She could feel something in her chest. A recognition. A connection to that flying style. After 20 minutes, Sarah thanked Captain Davies and moved on to the second interview. First Lieutenant Brian Parker was a younger pilot, only 4 years out of the Air Force Academy. He was tall and energetic, with the kind of confidence that came from being at the top of your class in everything you did. He talked enthusiastically about the advanced technology of the F-22. About the years of training it takes to master the aircraft. About his dreams of eventually commanding a fighter squadron, about his long-term goals of possibly becoming a general officer one day. Sarah found herself wanting to tell him to slow down. To enjoy the journey. To understand that life had a way of changing your plans. That sometimes the path you thought you would take gets interrupted by tragedy or loss or simple human frailty. But she didn't say any of that. She was professional. She asked good questions. She listened carefully to his answers. Again, her mind drifted. She kept glancing at the clock. Only 5 minutes until the third interview. Only 5 minutes until she would meet the third pilot. The one who had shown such excellence in the demonstration. At 3 o'clock, Captain Rodriguez knocked on the door and opened it slowly. "Sarah," he said, "this is Captain Jennifer Wu. She's one of our top pilots here at Nellis. She actually graduated from the academy just 3 years after you did." Sarah looked up and froze completely. The world seemed to stop spinning for a moment. Standing in front of her was a woman she recognized immediately. Not from recent events, but from a long time ago. From Sarah's past, from her time at the academy. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered. Jennifer's face went pale. She stared at Sarah for a moment, then recognition dawned on her face. "Sarah? Sarah Martinez?" Jennifer said slowly. Echo 7. Captain Rodriguez looked confused. "You two know each other?" Sarah and Jennifer looked at each other. Years of history passed between them in that moment. "We were at the academy together," Jennifer said. Sarah was. Sarah was a pilot. Was? Rodriguez asked, looking at Sarah. Sarah stood up on shaky legs. "Can we have a moment?" she asked Rodriguez. "Of course," he said, looking confused. "I'll give you some privacy." He left the room, closing the door behind him. Jennifer sat down slowly across from Sarah. Echo 7, Jennifer said quietly. "I haven't heard that call sign in 6 years. What are you doing here? Why are you a reporter now?" Sarah felt tears starting to form in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected to see someone from her old life. "I needed to leave," Sarah said. "It was too hard. Flying F-22s, being in that world. I couldn't do it anymore." Jennifer leaned forward. "Sarah, you were the best pilot in our class. We all knew you were going places. And then you just disappeared. For years, everyone wondered what happened to you. Some people said you had been killed in combat. Some said you had been injured. And then eventually people just stopped wondering." Sarah wiped her eyes. "I was okay," she said. "I just needed to do something different." "And now you're a reporter covering air shows?" Jennifer asked, not unkindly. "Watching other pilots do the job you used to do?" "It pays the bills," Sarah said quietly. Jennifer stood up and walked to the window. She looked out at the flight line where the F-22s were being prepared for their next demonstration. "Do you know what happened after you left?" Jennifer asked. "Do you know what your absence meant?" Sarah shook her head. "You were supposed to be the bridge," Jennifer said. "You were supposed to be the pilot who made it to the top. Who showed that women could do this job just as well as men. Better, in some cases. When you left, it felt like you were giving up. Like you were saying that it was too hard. That the military wasn't worth it." "That's not fair," Sarah said, standing up. "You don't know what I was going through." "No, I don't," Jennifer agreed. "But I know what the pilots who came after you were going through. I know that there were female pilots who wanted to quit but didn't because they thought of you. They thought of how hard you had worked. They thought they couldn't give up the way they thought you had." Sarah felt anger mixing with her sadness. "So this is my fault? The fact that you stayed in the Air Force is because of me? That's too much pressure to put on someone." "I'm not trying to make you feel guilty," Jennifer said, turning around. "I'm trying to tell you the truth. You mattered. Your choice mattered. And when you left, it affected more people than just yourself." They stood in silence for a long moment. "I was burned out," Sarah finally said. "I had flown too many missions. I had seen too much. I had watched good pilots die. And I couldn't handle it anymore. I needed to be a normal person for a while." Jennifer's expression softened. "I understand that. I really do. I've been there too. We all have. But you left during a critical time. When the Air Force was starting to really push for pilot diversity. When young women were looking up to pilots like you." Sarah sat back down. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want you to come back," Jennifer said. Sarah looked up at her, shocked. "The Air Force is different now," Jennifer continued. "We have better support for mental health. We have better programs for burned-out pilots. We have people who understand that flying combat missions takes a psychological toll. And we have pilots who remember Echo 7. Who want to fly with her again. I'm not that person anymore, Sarah said. Yes, you are, Jennifer replied. You flew that F-22 during the demonstration today. You watched me perform those maneuvers, and I saw recognition in your eyes. You recognized excellence because you understand what it takes to achieve it. You understand it in a way that no reporter can. Because you've lived it. Sarah felt her resolve wavering. She had been so sure that she had moved on. That she had left aviation behind. But watching the demonstration had stirred something inside her. Had reminded her of what she had lost. They didn't finish the formal interview. Instead, they talked for hours. They talked about the old days at the academy. They talked about the training flights. They talked about the friends they had lost over the years. They talked about the guilt that pilots carry when they survive and others don't. Jennifer shared her own struggles. She told Sarah about the time she had almost quit. She described a dark period about 2 years ago when she had questioned everything about her career choice. She had been flying a routine training mission when she had suddenly been overwhelmed by the memory of a fellow pilot who had died in a similar training exercise 5 years earlier. I was at 40,000 feet, Jennifer explained, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see straight. I was having a panic attack in an F-22 going Mach 1.8. Do you know how terrifying that is? Do you know what that feels like? Sarah nodded. She understood completely. I managed to bring the aircraft down safely, Jennifer continued. But that night, I wanted to quit. I wanted to walk away like you did. I wanted to be done with this life. I wanted to be normal again. I spent 3 days thinking about submitting my resignation. What stopped you? Sarah asked. You did, Jennifer said. I remembered you. I remembered how talented you were. I remembered thinking that if someone like you could be a pilot, then maybe I could too. I remembered your name on the squadron bulletin board after you left. All of us junior pilots wondered what had happened to you. We eventually figured out that you had been forced out because of some incident. And we all just assumed that you weren't strong enough. That you had broken under pressure. Sarah felt a stab of pain at that. She had been judged so harshly by people she had never even met. Had that been fair? Had that been right? I realized, Jennifer continued, that if I quit, then I would be proving that women couldn't make it in this world. I realized that my leaving would affect the next generation of female pilots the same way I thought your leaving had affected me. So I stayed. I got counseling. I talked to other pilots who had experienced similar things. And slowly, I got better. Jennifer paused and looked directly into Sarah's eyes. But Sarah, the reason I'm telling you this is that your leaving was never the failure I thought it was. You survived something traumatic. You did what you needed to do to stay alive. That takes courage, not weakness. And now, 6 years later, you're here. You're back at the base. Maybe that means something. Maybe that means you're ready to process what happened. Maybe that means it's time to come home. Sarah felt tears running down her face. She had carried so much guilt for so long. Guilt for surviving when David didn't, guilt for leaving, guilt for letting down everyone who had believed in her. By evening, Jennifer convinced Sarah to come back to her apartment on base instead of driving back to her hotel in Las Vegas. They ordered pizza and sat talking until well past midnight. They talked about their lives. They talked about their regrets. They talked about their hopes for the future. Around 2 in the morning, Jennifer asked Sarah the question that had been hanging between them all evening. Will you come back? Jennifer asked. Will you rejoin the Air Force? Sarah looked at her hands. She thought about David. She thought about the 6 years she had spent trying to forget. She thought about the article she had been assigned to write. I don't know, Sarah said honestly. I need to think about it. I need to understand why I left in the first place. Was it really because I couldn't handle it? Or was it because I didn't believe I deserved to survive when David didn't? Jennifer didn't answer immediately. She just sat with Sarah in the comfortable silence of people who understood each other deeply. Sarah spent the next week writing the article that had been assigned to her. She called it, "The Strength of Women in Fighter Aviation." She wrote about Jennifer and the other female pilots at Nellis. She wrote about the challenges they faced. She wrote about their courage and dedication. But she also wrote something personal. She wrote about a pilot named Echo 7 who had left the Air Force 6 years ago. She wrote about the struggle that many pilots face when they carry trauma from their missions. She wrote about how sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is admit when they need help. She didn't name herself. She didn't reveal that Echo 7 was her. But she wrote the truth about that pilot's journey. About the guilt of leaving. About the questions that haunted her. About the possibility that one day, she might find her way back. When she submitted the article, her editor called her immediately. "Sarah, this is the best piece you've written in years," he said. "The personal touch, the emotional honesty, this is going to resonate with people. How did you get these insights?" "I know the subject matter," Sarah replied carefully. The article was published and immediately gained attention. Aviation blogs discussed it. Military forums debated it. Mental health professionals praised it for bringing attention to pilot trauma and burnout. But more importantly, Sarah received dozens of emails from pilots. Both active duty and retired. They shared their own stories of struggle. They thanked her for writing about the real challenges of military aviation. They said her article had given them permission to acknowledge their own pain. One email came from a retired Air Force general. He wrote, "This article is a gift to the pilot community. It shows that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about having the courage to admit when you're breaking and the wisdom to get help." 2 weeks after the article was published, Jennifer called Sarah. "Did you see the news?" Jennifer asked excitedly. "What news?" Sarah replied. "The Air Force started a new program," Jennifer said. "A pilot rehabilitation and return-to-service program. They're specifically reaching out to experienced pilots who left for mental health reasons. They want to bring them back in a structured way, with psychological support and modified training schedules." Sarah's heart started racing. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Jennifer said. "And Sarah, they mentioned your article. They said that your writing about pilot trauma helped inspire this program." The brass realized they were losing good people because they didn't have adequate support systems. "Your article changed that." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Her article had made a difference. Her words had created change. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "They want pilots from the community to help lead this new program. To mentor returning pilots. To provide guidance. I recommended you for the position. Not as a pilot. But as a journalist and a person who understands what pilots go through." "I don't know," Sarah said hesitantly. "You don't have to know yet," Jennifer said. "But think about it. Think about using your skills as a reporter to help other pilots. Think about becoming a bridge between the pilot community and the public. Think about telling the stories that matter." That night, Sarah sat on her apartment balcony and looked out at the Las Vegas lights. She thought about her years as a pilot. She thought about why she had left. She thought about the article she had written and the responses she had received. She thought about Echo 7. About the pilot she had been. About what she might become. And she made her decision. 3 months later, Sarah stood in a television studio. She was being interviewed about her new role as director of the Air Force's Pilot Mental Health and Recovery Program. She was no longer just a reporter. She was something new. Something that combined her experience as a pilot with her skills as a communicator. The interviewer asked her about the transition. I realized that I left the Air Force because I was broken, Sarah said honestly. I thought that meant I had failed. But I've learned that being broken isn't failure. Staying broken is failure. Getting help is strength. And helping others who are also struggling is purpose. The program was already showing results. 12 pilots had returned to active duty through the new initiative. More were in the application process. And most importantly, the culture in the Air Force was changing. Leaders were starting to acknowledge that mental health matters. That pilots are human beings who need support. After the interview, Sarah received a phone call. It was her editor at National Aviation News. "Sarah, we want you to continue writing," he said. "We want a monthly column about pilot mental health and aviation culture. What do you think?" "I think that sounds perfect," Sarah said. That weekend, Sarah drove back out to Nellis Air Force Base. This time, it wasn't to cover an air show. It was to meet with a group of pilots who were considering returning to active duty through the new program. As she walked across the flight line, she saw Jennifer climbing into an F-22 for a training mission. Jennifer saw her and gave a thumbs up before the canopy closed. Sarah watched as the aircraft taxied toward the runway. She watched as it took off, climbing into the blue sky. She watched until it was just a speck in the distance. She thought about how close she had come to never feeling this connection again. Never being part of this world again. Never having the opportunity to make a difference in the lives of pilots like Jennifer. A young captain approached her. "Ma'am, are you Sarah Martinez?" Echo 7. Sarah smiled. "I am. Ma'am, I'm one of the pilots in the recovery program," the captain said. "I just wanted to thank you. Your article saved my life. I was going to end it all. I thought I was too broken to continue. But I read your piece and I realized I wasn't alone. I realized there was a path forward." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. She put her hand on the young captain's shoulder. "Thank you for telling me that," she said. "Thank you for choosing to stay. The Air Force needs pilots like you. And the world needs your voice." Sarah stood in front of a group of 50 pilots. They were part of the pilot mental health and recovery program. Some were recently returned to active duty. Some were considering returning. Some were simply seeking support and guidance. "Being a pilot is one of the most challenging things a human being can do," Sarah began. "It requires physical strength, mental toughness, and emotional resilience. But it also means that pilots experience stress and trauma that most people can't imagine. And that's okay. That's normal. That's human." She looked around the room. She saw fear in some faces. She saw hope in others. She saw the reflection of her own journey in the eyes of these pilots. "My name is Sarah Martinez," she continued. "My call sign was Echo 7. I was a fighter pilot in the United States Air Force. And I walked away because I couldn't handle the pain anymore." The room was completely silent. "But I've learned that walking away doesn't mean I was weak," Sarah said. "It means I was human. And coming back, in this new way, means I'm even stronger. Because now I understand both sides. I understand what it means to be a pilot. And I understand what it means to be someone who needs help." She paused and smiled. "I don't know if I'll ever fly an F-22 again," Sarah said. "I'm okay with that uncertainty. But I do know that I'm exactly where I need to be. And I'm here to help you find your own path forward. Whether that path leads back to the cockpit or somewhere else entirely, I'll be here to support you." After the briefing, Jennifer found Sarah in the hallway. "That was incredible," Jennifer said. "You were born to do this." "I was born to fly," Sarah corrected. "But this is my way of flying now. This is my way of touching the sky without leaving the ground." As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about the title that might describe her life now. She was just a reporter covering a flight, until the F-22 pilots heard her call sign, Echo 7. It had been true. In that moment when Jennifer heard her call sign, everything had changed. The reporter had become a bridge. The reporter had become a healer. The reporter had become exactly what the Air Force needed. Echo 7 had come home. Not to the cockpit, but to a place where she could make a real difference. A place where her experience as both a pilot and a survivor could help others find their way back. And that, Sarah realized, was worth more than any air show. More than any article. More than anything she had ever expected her life to become. The sky was always there. Whether she was flying through it or helping others navigate the turbulence of life below, Sarah Martinez was exactly where she belonged. This story follows Sarah Martinez, a former F-22 pilot with the legendary call sign, Echo 7, who had left the Air Force and become an aviation reporter to escape the trauma of her past. When assigned to cover an air show at Nellis Air Force Base, Sarah unexpectedly encounters Jennifer Wu, an old academy friend who is now a skilled F-22 pilot. Jennifer reveals that Sarah's absence had affected many pilots and asks her to consider returning to the Air Force. Through this encounter, Sarah writes a powerful article about pilot mental health and trauma. The article inspires the Air Force to create a new pilot mental health and recovery program. Sarah takes on a role directing this program, becoming a bridge between her experience as both a pilot and someone who struggled with burnout. The story shows that sometimes coming home isn't about returning to what you were. It's about finding a new way to use your strengths to help others. Sarah returns to aviation in a different capacity, not as a pilot in the cockpit, but as a healer on the ground, helping other pilots find their own paths forward.